Guys, my name is Michael Anthony. I'm a wedding and portrait photographer based in Los Angeles, California. Today, I am going to be talking to you guys about how we use MagMod images to stand out in one of the most competitive markets in the world. Anybody here from New York or Miami or one of those larger markets? Okay, well, it's still competitive where you guys live, I imagine as well too. So, how many wedding photographers do we have here, primarily? Okay, lots of you guys. Anything else? Anybody else shoot anything else aside from weddings? Okay, cool. So everything that we talk about today, come on in guys, come on in, how you doing? Yeah. Everything that we talk about today will be applicable whether you're a wedding photographer, senior, portrait. If you're taking pictures of people, these techniques will work, okay? And I'm gonna talk to you guys about why we choose MagMod products in a bit here. And I gotta figure out which button makes this move. What's that?
Yeah, let me repeat.
Hang on 1 second, guys. We'll technical difficulties. We're gonna get going here in a second. Awesome. So guys, just a quick couple of things, right? I choose to use MagMod products mainly because of their ease of use. If you guys are shooting weddings, portraits, whatever, I always recommend that it's better for you to interact with your clients than it is to be messing around with your gear. I know it sounds like common sense, but us as photographers, we often fall into this trap of spending too much time fiddling with our stuff to get everything just perfect, right? Instead, we want to use these tools that are much easier to get activated on our flashes, to modify them and control the light in the ways that we want. And we can use MagMod's tools to control not only positioning, not only the light fall off, but things like color as well. We're going to get into that as well too. Okay, so kind of went over my background with you guys. I run a wedding photography studio in LA. We do about 150 weddings per year, give or take. A team of 8 photographers. I myself shoot between 30 and 40 every year. I love shooting weddings. But the reason why this matters to you guys, if you guys are shooting weddings, is because we have used lighting in order to stand out, right? That's what makes our work different from the majority of our competitors. So if you guys go to California, the look in California is this like overexposed, like backlit, really creamy, dreamy kind of style of photography that many people tend to fall into, okay? But when you do that, and because it is a desired style by a lot of brides, it becomes seen too often. And it makes it very, very hard for you to stand out and charge more money and have people give you money for something that everybody else can do for cheaper. So we tended to utilize a darker, more three-dimensional kind of style to our photography that helped our work stand out. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about how those images were made and specifically which modifiers we use to make them, okay? If you guys need to find me, this is how you guys can find me right here. I want to go over my 3 rules of lighting with you guys, okay? These are the 3 rules that I try to live by whenever I am utilizing flash, off-camera light, or natural light when it pertains to creating portraiture of my clients. Rule number 1, your subject should always be at least as bright as the brightest part of your image. And the reason why this is important, it's actually scientific data that our eyes are attracted to changes in light patterns, and those changes, we favor the brighter parts of the photo. So if your subject is the brightest part of the image, you're going to direct the viewer directly where they need to be every time you shoot. So if you guys are trying to choose a background, rather than looking at your backgrounds in terms of the locations, try to find the backgrounds that have good light. And if you can't find good light, that is when these things come in. That is when we are going to add light to make good light in our scenes, okay? Rule number 2, all artificial lighting should be used with intent. Today, in this day of age, photographers are becoming better at using flash, and it's becoming more and more common for people to do so. But that means that you guys have to be disciplined about the way that you use flash. It is not a style. Flash photography is not a style, right? It's a tool. So we want to use flash with intent, and that intent may be to make your lighting look more natural. Okay, or just fill in some shadows on a face. We don't always need to underexpose our background and overexpose our subjects. We just want to make sure we're following rule number 1, right? Last thing, great light is all about balance. If you guys see images that look too flashy, right? Typically that's because we've underexposed our background too much, or we've chosen the wrong modifier for the actual image that we are trying to create. I'm going to get into how we choose modifiers in a bit. So I'm going to talk about the MagMod products that I use, okay? Grids. Grids are by far the most common product that I'm going to use by MagMod. And the reason why is because they're super simple to use. They snap onto the top of a flash like that, and what it does is it narrows your light spread quite a bit so that light isn't bouncing around, right? If we look at the head of most speed lights or any kind of strobe, those lights are designed to spread light out, right? And the reason for that is because they were originally designed to be used on camera, and the goal is to get light out and in front of you. And instead, when we use this to modify the light, we can actually pin light on our subjects and make them stand out as the brightest part of that image. So they allow for a lot of creativity, and I'll get into why in a bit. Gels. So Gels are probably the second most commonly used item that I use in my workflow when I'm using Flash. And what these allow you to do, it allows you to play with color in your scene. If you have a scene that's kind of boring, kind of neutral colors, right? This might give you a way to make it interesting. Now, there's a couple tricks to using gels. Gelled Flash will typically show up wherever the shadows are in your images, right? So we'll get into this in a little bit, but if you guys want to have those really saturated colors, which you were asking me about a little bit ago, you want to make sure that you're using these to light the shadowed areas of your images and not blending it with standard white light, because that will take precedence in your scene, okay? The Mag Box, which is this tool down here, have you guys used this before? This is an awesome product, guys. It's an amazing product. In fact, the reason why it's so unique is because not only can you modify the color of your light through a modifier, which is one of the first softboxes that really allow you to do that easily, they have something called the focus diffuser. The focus diffuser allows you not only to grid your light, and just kind of we were talking about a second ago with speed lights, it allows you to actually increase the power output over that of the typical softbox diffusion panel. So if you guys are shooting out in midday sun, anybody live in Texas or Florida or somewhere where it's really bright outside all the time, you're constantly battling with the sun. I know I am in California. That tool allows me to kind of create a softer light pattern when we are in this situation where we are working with sunlight without having to carry big packs and generators and things like that. So it's an amazing tool, one of my favorite products that they came out with. And then lastly, the Sphere. I'm going to show you guys today why a lot of people use this wrong. I'm going to show you the right way to use it and how you can get the most benefit of it. But what it does, in short, is it allows the light to spread out. So it kind of does the opposite of what a grid will do. It's going to allow that light to spread out in a 360 pattern. And in addition to that, it's going to diffuse your light and reduce the specularity on it. So we'll go over that in a second as well, too. All right, so we talked about grids for a second. I'm going to go over, guys, in this presentation, I want to show you guys how images were made and also the thought process behind them so that when you're out there, you can kind of work in the same scenario. So in this actual room, it was lit by tungsten overhead. It was kind of similar lighting to what we have right here, but they had these beautiful murals on the wall, right? Now, if I were to put her right there, she would blend into the background and you don't know what the subject would be. Is it her or is it going to be the painting, right? So by using rule number 1, we're actually directing the viewer's attention directly where it needs to be. So we place her in between the two swans right here, and then we add just a little bit of light on her in a grid pattern. I'm using a ProPhoto A1 right here with the MagMod grid attached to it, and that allowed for that circular pattern to fall on top of her. Now, if you guys are using a standard flash like this, then what you can do is you can put this on here, right? And then add this on top of it, and then you can get that circular pattern as well. So if you didn't know, these MagMod products are stackable. You can use them together in a variety of circumstances and situations, right? This is another image. Now, this is a detail photo. Remember, our eyes are attracted to changes in light patterns before they're attracted to the brightest part of an image. But the most significant change in light pattern happens right here in the center. You guys see it, right? Which is a silhouette. Problem is that I wanted to show off the detail of her dress. She had this heart-shaped train, right? And it's really beautiful. So in order to really bring attention there, we had to bring some light onto that dress, but I didn't want that light to spill throughout the entire room. So we added a grid to that light and fired it directly down at the bottom of her dress. So our eye first goes to the most significant change in light pattern, which is going to be the silhouette. And then the next thing that our eye goes down to is the bottom half of that image in order to bring our eye to the train. So we have a detail photo and a portrait at the same time, which is my favorite way to photograph details. Okay? We're adding a grid right here in order to control the light spill on the floor. Have you guys ever used your flashes here and then you see the light spilling all over the floor, right? Well, a grid is a great way to stop that from happening. And one of the tricks I have when you guys are using these rectangular heads is to hold that light vertical, the same shape as your subject, and it will actually give you a much wider pattern on them as opposed to holding it or letting it be on the stand horizontal. And if you guys are working solo, you can put them on these stands right here and you would just basically move it like that and then you would turn the top of it in order to get it to be vertical when you're working with your clients. Okay? Another instance here. Now, this is a multiple light setup. We have a light directly behind them, and we have a light in front of them, okay? Now, if we're not using a grid right here, what's going to happen to the edges of the vineyards right here, right? Those are going to light up like it's the 4th of July, okay? And the reason why we don't want that is because now these are closer to the light source, so they're going to actually be brighter than their subjects themselves, okay? So what we did is we put the light behind them, we added a grid on them, and that allows a little separation underneath their chin right here, and it allows us to really darken down that sky and still see his dark hair and his jacket in that dark sky. And then we added another light in the front of them right here on this side by pin lighting them and making sure that we're not overexposing the edges of the frame. Really important, okay?
Is that a grid in front or
What was the question? Yeah. So we have two grids right here. We have a grid behind them and a grid in front as well too, right? Oops. Go back. Okay. So this is one of my favorite techniques. If you guys want to make an image interesting and all you have is a bad room and a window, right? Take that light, bring it outside the window, and if you have these patterns like most windows do, you can create patterns on the wall. Now my goal, my thought process here is I wanted to create what looked like midday sun, right? Coming through the window, or end of day sun, should I say, coming through the window. So we took the light outside, added a gel to it, and then that gel, we fired it inside, and it allowed us to create that pattern on the wall and also light her face at the same time. Now in the back over here, you see how her back is lit up, right? We have another grid on her back with the gel on top of it. They're stacked together like I showed you a second ago right here, and that matches the color. If we don't modify the color of that light, it looks like white light mixed with orange light, and it doesn't look good to our eyes, right? So it's important to make sure you're managing the color of your light with the gels, which is one of the amazing things, how they go together. What's going on? No questions, Alyssa? All right. Okay, guys, again right here, we're using the grid, and we're also shifting the color using gels here. So I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes, but I want to focus on the grid here for a second, right? What we did is behind them, we have a light with the sphere on it, which is spreading the light out inside that altar, okay? And by doing that, we're allowing everything back there to light up, including the leaves on the trees. But in order to get that light on their face to not spill on the front, we had to use a grid on that as well too, to control that light pattern so that we're only lighting them rather than lighting this entire scene. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay, so another one right here, we have a gridded front light in front of them. Okay, we have a light behind them, and the light behind them is lighting them up. You guys can see that, it's pretty obvious, right? But we had a gridded front light over here, which is lighting their faces in order to make sure that they become the brightest part of the image. If they're just backlit right here, they're gonna have the same shadow tones, same shadow detail as all of this right here, but you're not gonna be able to see their faces. And if you have people, I can tell you guys from experience, if you're taking photos of people and they're small people in a big environment and they can't see their face, whether it's a silhouette or they're just not lit, they typically won't buy that photo. So if you guys are doing IPS or you're doing sales, always make sure that the faces are lit, especially when people are really small in the frame, okay? This is another one that we did with that same technique I showed you guys a couple of minutes ago. We have a light outside of the window, and it's gridded, okay? But behind them, we have another light that is gridded as well too, and that's controlling the light spill in this room. See, the lamp was giving us nice orange light on the wall, and if we were to take a light, just a standard speed light like this, and we weren't to grid it, we were just to use it with a zoom or whatever it may be, that light is gonna spill all throughout that wall back there, and it's gonna cause distractions, right? Again, our eyes are attracted to changes in light pattern. So if we have different light on the wall that's not supposed to be there, it's attracting our eye away from our subject. So the grid, again, I can't tell you guys how invaluable that is to our workflow. It helps us to control light quite a bit. All right, let's talk about gels for a few minutes, okay? We can use gels in a couple of different ways. We can use them creatively, or we can use them correctively, okay? We can also use them to add complementary colors to our scene as well, okay? So here are a couple images where we use gels. Sorry. Oh, they're leaving, but they're back there, those two. Okay, so this is a wedding we shot a couple of days ago, and what we did here is we used warmer gels to match the warm tones that were already in the room, okay? So if you guys are out there in a reception halls typically have like tungsten lighting overhead. And by adding warm tones, you're able to match those tones, and then you can manipulate the white balance as a whole, as opposed to having to try to separate it on your subject and on your background. So in some instances, you may want those super saturated orange colors. And in that instance, you would take the gel off and you would let white light fall on them, and then you can warm up your in post-production, you can warm it up. It'll turn that orange lights in the background much brighter. In this instance, we're using it creatively to match the tones so that it's the same color light on them. It looks like they could have been lit by the candles as well. Does that make sense? Awesome. So this is the opposite, right? We're using blue gels right here in order to match all the uplighting that was in the room, okay? So we turned our white balance up a bit to warm the light on them, but we have a blue light in the very top over there and ones on the sides over here bringing light in through and lighting our entire scene. Okay, so we're using a magenta gel in this image now. So to light this, we had a mag box at the very top, okay, in that hole right there, and we're lighting it from above, okay? It was a skylight. And then on the bottom, underneath her, this is a museum in Italy, by the way, so we had this beautiful architecture we're trying to show off. We put a magenta gelled flash down below, and we lit that from below, and that light spilled out throughout the entire room, but it really created those magenta highlights directly underneath, right? So if we have orange tones in the image, magenta is a complementary color. We can use those things together on the color wheel. If you look at them, they are complementary colors, so it works well together, okay? Okay, so again here, we're using warm gels. Now, if we look behind them, there's a light on a stand behind them fired into the back of the room. That light has a spear on it, and it's got an orange gel, and it's spreading that light out, matching the colors of the lamps that were on the sides right there, okay? In addition to that, we have another an ungelled light on them in the front to put that white light on their face, and then it allowed us to really warm up the colors in the background. So I know you were asking questions about how to get saturated colors. These are some tricks that you can use to really increase the saturation of your images. Okay, so here's a trick that we call color shifting, right? I kind of do this oftentimes with my couples at dusk or whenever I have a lot of shadows in my images, because this is where this really looks good. And what we do is we set our camera's white balance in camera to 3200 Kelvin, okay? And by doing that, it turns everything blue. It's like it's made for being shot under tungsten lights, right? So it turns everything blue. So if you have daylight, that daylight turns blue. The water behind them turns blue. Everything turns blue. But then we put orange gels on our subject, and those orange gels, when the camera's set to 3200, will turn back to white, right? So now we have standard white light on the front and on the back of her, and it allows us to create this like three-dimensional image, whereas if we didn't, the background would have been white, the color of her dress is white, so they would have blended in together right here. So by adding that, or using that color shifting technique, we can separate her further from the background. You can see in the shadow areas where the light's not hitting, how it's starting to turn blue in the bottom right there, and that's because of the 3200 white balance on the camera. The question was, do we have to slow down our shutter speed to get this image? And the answer in this case is no, right? Sometimes you would. We were in Hawaii right here, and every 5 minutes that water would shoot up like a rocket, right? It's a blowhole behind it, right? So we just shot as that was happening. This is probably maybe, I would say, about 1/100th of a second, if I had to guess. Okay, so last shot of the night. If you guys are wedding photographers, I highly recommend at the end of the day trying to take a nighttime portrait, right? A night photo of them to close out your album. It helps to sell that last spread of the album. It helps to close out the story that you guys are trying to tell. So in this instance right here, we were leaving. We were about half hour overtime, and you know, all of you who are wedding photographers know when you're half hour overtime, you're just like, what time can I get out of here, right? And that was us. So I go to my wife. I'm like, give me 5 minutes, right? And she gave me the look because we were like 3 hours away from home. She's like, you got 5 seconds. You better go and get this shot, right? So I went up here, put a blue gel behind them with the spear on it to get that circular pattern on the wall. And then we had a magenta gel, again, complementary colors, facing toward the crowd, all the people who were dancing. I knew by raising them up, we had a clean spot. We put them in the negative space, and the magenta gel is lighting up the rest of the scene. The lights on the sides right there were just the DJ lights that were already there.
Them first, the backlight first, and then...
So the question here was, do we expose the backlight first? So every time I use flash, right, first thing I do is I get my ambient exposure, which in this case, there should be no ambient light, right? We're just basically the only ambient light was the 2 lights on the side. So I'll take my camera. If you're using a DSLR, you'll go in live view mode. If you're using a mirrorless, you already have live view mode already up there, right? And you're just gonna go ahead and adjust your camera to your sync speed, which in this case, my camera was 1/200th of a second. Then I'm gonna go ahead and dial in with my aperture where I want my ambient light to be. Then we add our flashes one at a time. In this case, I kind of already knew where we were because we were using these lights for reception lights, right? And I know that when I slap a blue gel on, I'm taking away 2 stops of power. So in this instance, I had to turn my light almost all the way down because it was so close to that background. But the other light, we had to turn up quite a bit because it's got to push through people and it's got to hit the ceiling of this environment as well too. So whichever way you guys opt to get to your light, I always recommend having a system to do so because, again, the less time you're spending messing with your flash, the more time you're interacting with your clients, the happier they're going to be. And at the end of the day, I got to tell you guys a little trick here just from all the sales we've done over the years. The photos, even if they're subpar, right, if the client had an amazing experience, their perception of them will be that they like their photos. So just make sure you're giving them a really good experience from start to finish, okay? Good photos matter, but the experience matters even more. Okay, so studio portraiture. Guys, anybody shoot studio? Come on, there we go, all right. So in this instance, we have a magenta gelled flash behind her, which is lighting up the background. That's the obvious way, okay? But one of the things that you guys can do with gels to really make cool looking images is you can use them as a fill light. So remember I told you guys a little bit ago that gelled light shows up in the shadows of your subject. Wherever white light is not hitting, that is where the gelled light is really gonna be saturated and look good. So in this instance, we have the white light coming from this side, okay? But we added a purple gel as a fill light. We bounced it into a V-flat on camera left right here, right? And what that did is it actually allowed the light to come back, light her, and we can get these nice shadow tones or magenta tones in the shadows of the image, which complement the background light as well too. So there's endless possibilities on how you use complementary colors. Maybe you have an orange fill light on her and a blue light on the background, right? Maybe you do red and green. Look at the color wheel and find the opposites, and that's how you guys will be able to determine what colors will go good together, okay? So this is a simple shot, right? And I know I told you guys a little bit ago that people don't typically buy an image where they can't see their faces, and it's true. So, but this was for me, right? This is for our portfolio. It's to get people to really like what we're doing or really feel our style. So if you look in this scene right here, you've got orange light all over the pillars right here. And that orange light is coming from the sun. Okay, so we added a light directly behind them, and underneath here, this is just a cell phone that I'm holding underneath the camera, okay? And that allows us to get that reflection because there were people walking all over the place. If you ever shoot at places like this, architectural, beautiful architectural places, you're gonna run into like crowds, right? So we added a phone underneath to get rid of them, but we added the orange gel behind them to match the color of the sun that was falling on the pillars, and that allowed us to create an image that looked complementary. Now, if we went here and we were to ungel that flash, we're just to use white light on that background, our eyes would look at it, and we're looking at the changes in color patterns now, rather than the actual subjects themselves, which is where we want to bring the viewer's attention. All right, let's talk about the MagBox. This is one of my favorite products. It's a newer product. It's been out for what, about a year now, give or take. Anybody have one? Is it like your favorite thing, right? I absolutely love it. And if no matter what lights you guys are using, they have an adapter for it. So we're pro photo users. The MagBox stays on our B10 almost all day long, right? So getting into what these things do, the box can soften the light, but more importantly, it can soften the shadow to highlight transition. That's what we're really looking for. When we talk about soft light, we're really talking about that transition of light from highlight to shadow, and the MagBox will help smooth that a little bit. Now, to give you guys an idea of how we choose our modifiers for any place that we're working in, right? Whatever light is falling on my subject, natural light, ambient light, at that moment, we're gonna try to modify our light to match that ambient light. So if we're out in the sun, okay, I would either use the focus diffuser, which is a little bit harder, or take the diffusion panel off altogether, or use a bare flash or a reflector, because it's gonna give us a harder transition from highlight to shadow, okay? When we're working with our subjects in shadow or under cloud cover, right, or overcast sky, then we're gonna use that normal diffusion panel, which is gonna give us an even softer highlight to shadow transition, and that's how we choose our modifiers when we're working in these scenes. So, the MagBox allows you to modify the colors. So if we're talking about color shifting, techniques like that, right, where we need soft light but we need color light at the same time, before it was difficult. You would have to go in there, find adapters, or actually tape gels over the surface of the softbox. But the MagBox now allows you to modify that light at the source of the light, which is a very small piece that looks like this right here. You just snap this over the light source, and now your light is modified. You can use gels like this, but more often we use it with the corrective gels and the creative gels, okay? So let's talk a little bit and we'll work through these images, okay? Now this is a technique that we did a video on. If you guys are interested in that, you can see it on our YouTube. And what we do here is we slowed the shutter speed down to about 1/8 of a second. Now that water's coming in. I always get asked here, were they on a boat? No, they weren't on a boat. That water comes in and goes out. And when that water goes out, we bring them up onto the rock. And that's how we get the shot, right? Then when the water comes in, we're at about 1/8 of a second exposure. But if you're not using flash, you're gonna have motion blur on your subject, right? But by using flash and having a slightly darker background, you can freeze the motion in your subject, and you can get this type of image in one shot if you want to, okay? And it's often that we do this when we're shooting at the beach. Now we're using a CTO gel here because we're getting later in the day, and it allows us to match the ambient light in the environment. Again, when we go back to talking about flash and making it look as natural as possible, one of the things that people do often is they don't modify the color of their light, right? So it doesn't look believable to a viewer if you're shooting at sunset and the light on your subject is completely white without color, right? That light would have a normal tint to it naturally, so you want to put a little bit of light on their face and color that light appropriately as well too, okay?
What's your YouTube channel where people can find it?
I gotta get back to you, and I think it's Elevate Your Photography is the name of the actual channel. So, In this instance, we're shooting out there at sunset, and we added a gel on the light in addition to the diffusion panel, right? The regular focus diffuser, what that allows us to do is it allows us to work with that backlight in order to create good light on our subjects and take advantage of the majority of the power that's coming out of that strobe. So in the past, when you would put a softbox on a flash, right, you're eating into 1 or 2 stops of power, right? But now when we're using this panel right here, it allows us to cut that down significantly and make much more efficient use of our flash when you're working in a harder light environment. So I love working with this, especially out in the sun. It really helps to make images that are natural looking considering the circumstances, right? So again here, using the MagBox camera left, we have a quarter CTO gel on it to help warm our subjects up a little bit. That was the sky on that day. It was just a beautiful day, beautiful venue that we were shooting at right here. So we wanted to really show that off and take advantage of it. So by using that orange gel, again, we're able to create images that look natural for the scene that we're working in. Again, you want to make sure you're paying attention to that light color. And when you're working with soft light, you want to be able to do both of them at the same time, which is why I highly, highly recommend that tool. Okay, so another one right here, we're using the MagBox on the right, and we're shooting here at noon. And at noon, that's when your light is going to be about 5,500 Kelvin, so we've got no gel on this light. Okay, but the light's coming over here, and it's coming from the same direction as the sun. So here's a little trick for you guys. If you want that deep blue sky, that deep blue saturation in the sky, make sure that your light source is coming from the same direction as the sun. Oftentimes, later in the day, we shoot against the sun, so we can get that sun flare, we can get those beautiful colors, right? But earlier in the day, it's really hard to get that out of the sun, right? What you're going to end up doing is you're going to be stopping down to 16 or 22 or something like that, and you're going to lose all the detail in the foreground in order to get that color in your sky. So flip your whole scene around, okay, and then you can actually get the deep blue colors in the sky, and you're not going to make your flash work as hard. So we're probably around f11 right here, which your camera and your strobe should be able to handle no problem, okay? All right, so here's a scene that we use color shifting again. We're working in a very dark environment, but we need that soft light. So there's 3 lights in this scene. I'm going to tell you guys where they all are, okay? Light number 1 is behind the tree. And the goal with that light was to light up the leaves, right? We want to really backlight that. Anything that is semi-translucent that you put light behind will show up on camera. So water, foliage, any sort of crystal or glass, all that will show up on camera and it will diffract the light. It will look beautiful. So if you look over here, the light is behind there lighting up the lanterns and it's lighting up the tree. But if we did that now, we have no backlight on the subject because the tree stump is blocking the subject. So we have another light behind the subject, this time pointing directly at them, lighting up the veil, lighting up the subject. The last light is the light on the camera left over here, utilizing the MagBox. And now we also have a CTO gel on that light, and that allows us to turn the scene, the sky behind them, very blue, and it allows us to put warm light on them and create soft light at the exact same time. Cool. So this is the MagBox camera left, okay? And again, we're shooting against the sun later in the day. We had soft shadows on our subject in the front, so we're using the MagBox to really kind of blend in with those soft shadows. In addition to that, we have another gelled light, an ungelled light behind them, which is giving us that backlight. This is the same couple I showed you guys in the vineyard a little bit earlier. This allows us to really create that separation behind them, and at the same time, it allows us to bring out all the detail in their dress. When you take your light source and you move it off axis of your subject, okay, now you're emphasizing texture. So if you have one of these dresses that has a lot of lace, a lot of detail on it, by moving that light source off to the side a little bit, you're going to get texture on that dress and it's going to look really nice. Now, on the other hand, if you're photographing a tight portrait of somebody and you're really close to them, it's not always the best thing to use that side light because now you're emphasizing texture on their skin. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, camera right, we have the MagBox right here. We're using a quarter CTO gel, which is kind of my go-to at sunset, right? And that's lighting her up, and it's also allowing us to really bring the background out, bring that scene out there. Really beautiful sunset during that day. Any questions so far? All right, we'll have questions at the end too.
I'm noticing a similarity between when you use the grid and the MagBox. I'm wondering why you changed.
So if we need to use, well, there's a couple reasons, right? If I'm photographing somebody and we need soft light on them, remember, it depends on where they're going to be at that time, and that's when we're going to be using one tool or the other. So if we're photographing them indoors or we need really, really tight light, that's when we're using the grid because it's almost like a spotlight effect, right? The spread on the grid is like this big, but the spread on the MagBox is much wider. So if we're looking to light an entire scene, we're going to use the MagBox as well. And also if we need soft light, we're going to use the MagBox as well too. So that's the biggest differences between when we use the two of them.
In one instance, you lighting up like kind of in hills.
Exactly, yeah, and if you get your light further away from your subject, you're gonna light up more of that scene. The closer they are, you're gonna make it a lot tighter, right? Okay, so again right here, this was a gloomy day, so we changed the sky in this image, right? This was a gloomy day, but my couple had put on their shot list that they wanted to shoot at sunset, okay? So that was their expectation, okay? So what we did right here is I used a warm gel on the light where I typically wouldn't do it in this situation, okay? But I did it because I knew in post-production I was gonna put a sunset sky back there and we were gonna warm everything up, okay? So we're kind of thinking about the edit as we're shooting, and that allows us to create an image that looks more real. If not, if we just use white light on them to tone the entire image correctly, would have been much more difficult to do after the fact. Okay, this is just the most simplistic way that we would use the MagBox. We need soft light to match the light that's falling on her. We shot this on the beach, right? And the sun was in the background, so we let those highlights completely blow out. In this instance, I'm okay with it because our eye isn't just attracted to the brightest part of the image. More often, it's attracted to, again, changes in light patterns, right? So the change in light pattern, you have all this negative space, and then you have actual texture right here, and that allows us to get our eyes directly where it needs to go right here. So if you guys look right here, see the shadow, the highlight to shadow transition, how it's soft and it's smooth? If you have a hard light on her, like let's just say it was direct sunlight, right? That transition is gonna be much more abrupt. So when you want that smoother, more gradual transition, that's when you're using that MagBox and you're getting it closer to your subject in this instance in order to create that really soft light on her face. All right, let's talk about the sphere for a second. Does anybody have this tool right now? Okay, take it off the flash. All right, guys, couple things about this. I want to clear up some misinformation about this, right? Because I train my own team, and a lot of times my team comes to me, they use these tools, and this is a misconception they have. So I imagine many of you may have it as well too. This tool does not soften up your light. It does not smooth that highlight to shadow transition. That is not what it was designed to do. Not when you're using it direct at your subject, at least, okay? What this tool does, and what it does well, is it spreads the light out in a 360-degree angle, and in addition to that, it will also reduce specularity on your subject. So when I talk about specularity, I'm talking about those really harsh highlights that you'll see in very small parts of the images. So if you use a silver reflector, right, and you get it real close to your subject, you guys will see the look I'm talking about. That's a very specular look. But if you use the white side of the reflector, now you have very soft and even highlights and shadows. So the specularity comes from using a small light source in relationship to whatever it's being, the light is hitting. So in this case, the natural oils of our skin will typically cause specularity, right? Now when you use this right here, it will reduce that because you're reducing the light directly onto your subject by using this right here and spreading it out a little bit more, okay? So when we get into this though, more importantly, this tool is actually used better to spread light out in a room. So the way that I use this more often than anything else is we'll actually take a sphere, we'll put it in the room and we'll light up the entire room as a fill light. Okay, then we use a direct light source, whether it be a MagBox or even a direct flash on our subjects, and that allows us to reduce the contrast in that room. So fill light is something that you guys can use, and you can use this light to do. And also, if you wanted to spread it out on a bounce source, so let's just say I want to bounce light off this wall, and I put the flash right here, this sphere is going to spread that light out along this entire wall and give us a much more larger surface area to work with, as opposed to lighting it with just a standard flash where you're going to have a much smaller highlight right here. Is that making sense? So that's the best time to use this. When you're outdoors in daylight and you put this on your flash and you're using it on your subjects, it's not making your light any softer, making your light quality any better. It's actually just reducing the efficiency of your flash, right? So use this whenever you need to spread light out, whenever you need to reduce specularity, and you're going to get the best uses out of it. So let's go over a couple of images here real quick. So this is a good instance, right? Using this light as a backlight is one of my this tool as a backlight is one of my favorite ways to use it. So in this instance, the light is behind them, but because we have this on there, it actually will light the subjects right here, as you see, but also it's going to go backward and it's going to light up the wall a little bit as well too, and complement the uplighting that was already there. So by utilizing this to spread out along the background, we can oftentimes, as a backlight, we can oftentimes get that light spread to look a lot better, a lot more natural. And there's times you want that, and there's times you don't. So sometimes if you want to get rid of the shadows on the floor, then you're going to opt to use a grid instead of the sphere. Does that make sense?
Michael,
Yeah. It's pointing directly at them in this instance, yeah. Now, sometimes we might mess with that angle. So if I'm there and I'm shooting it and it doesn't look right, there's not enough light toward the top, then we'll angle it upward a little bit as well too. I try, just so you guys know, when I'm using backlight like this, I try to position it behind the groom's head and aim it at the bride oftentimes. And sometimes it's lower, but in this instance, that's how we have it. And by doing that, we can sometimes get this highlight on their face, because usually it'll be bouncing off one of their faces and onto the other as well. This is another great use for it, right? Why would we want to spread the light out in this instance? Because of the rain, right? Because the rain is all, so if you guys are taking these rain shots, which are pretty common nowadays, they look beautiful, right? Why wouldn't you? But if you're doing it, one of the tricks that we would use before these things came out is we would just set the wide panel diffuser on our flash and it would spread the light out this way, right? But with this, when you put this on your flash now you're able to spread it out in a 360 pattern, and it allows you to really focus on lighting everything up right here. They had some fluorescent light in the scene. I climbed up the light pole and threw my jacket over it to stop the fluorescent light from hitting them in the face right here. So gotta make sure that you're controlling that light pollution even from the natural light sources as well. Okay, so in this instance, we're utilizing a couple of light sources. We have two V-flats, which are giving us the majority of the light on our subject, right? But the contrast in the image was still too much. So we took a sphere, we added it on camera, just right on top of the camera, shot it up into the white ceilings, and now that light is, that contrast in that room is reducing, and we're able to have much more gradual, kind of natural looking light in that image. If you want images that look more like natural light, reduce the flash to ambient ratio, and you can do that by adding fill light, or the perceived flash to ambient ratio, and you can use that by adding fill light into the shadow areas of your image. Okay? Another instance where we want that light to spread out, right? We're backlighting them, but we want these shadows, and we want all of these shadows leading in, pushing our eye into the scene right here. So in this instance, we have the backlight, the sphere directly behind them, spreading out throughout the entire scene and lighting up the entire back of it there as well too. So we utilize a couple of different light sources in this image. So they were practicing their first dance, and I was like, okay guys, hang on a second, we have to actually light this up and make it look good. So I put a sphere behind them to add the light on the floor. We actually have two other lights directly pointed at them, and I believe that those have grids on them as well, and we're lighting them from both sides. So if you guys are photographing couples and they're looking at each other, typically if you want the light off to the side, you're gonna get it on one side or the other, right? Somebody's gonna have shadows on their face. One of the ways you can avoid that is making that second light a fill light, reducing the power on it by like 2 stops less than the main light, and then you can reduce that contrast, and you still have some direction, you still have texture on the dress, but you're not gonna be completely dark and in shadow on the face. Okay, so at nighttime we often use the sphere again as a backlight. You guys can see now that this is my most common way that I use this. I use it as bounce flash as well, but more often than not we're utilizing it as a backlight right here. So in this instance there's a bare flash with no gel on it, with just the sphere on it, spreading the light out, right? We set the camera's white balance at 3200, and that's why this light turns blue. Now if you guys see the dust in the air right there, if you guys are working in any sort of environment that has like high humidity, okay, you'll get this kind of effect, and it looks really good, but you have to have high humidity, and what that is just lighting up all the stuff that's in the air, right? Perfect example. So, funny story behind this wedding. My couple's like, we have a permit to go shoot out at the Mayan temples. We were in Cancun at the time. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. I don't know how you got it, but it's gonna be a lot of fun, right? So we drive 3 hours to the Mayan temples. The second I get my light stands out of the car, security rushes us. They're like, you can't shoot here, right? And she's like, I bought a permit. And he's like, no, this is a photo tour. It's not a permit. You guys can't shoot here. So we had driven 3 hours in the middle of Mexico, and we need to find a place to shoot now to do their creatives. So I'm on my phone. I'm trying to find places to go. We're asking locals, and they recommended this cave. So we went to this cave, and inside this cave was one of the most humid places I've ever been to. You walk inside, you can see how wet her hair is right now. That's all the humidity that was in there, okay? But when we added the backlight, you guys can see these light rays that were coming out from it, right? And these light rays, we dodged them a little bit in post, but this is created in camera. This is not created in post-production, right? So you get that in a very, very humid environment. That's how you're gonna be able to get this kind of light trails coming behind people as well. Is that it? Did I push back? Did I push exit? Nope, I think I got more. Anyway, guys, let's go with questions right here. I think that's the last slide in this. Any questions?
Harrison, quickly, you were just doing the sphere. Can you do the grid too?
So in this instance right here?
Like you're saying, the sphere is used for this reason.
Yeah. So the sphere, they're exact opposites, right? The sphere spreads the light out. The grid focuses the light in one spot, okay? It allows you to spotlight your subjects. There are cases where you'll use both, right? But that's when you want that light spread out in a circular pattern pushing forward and not 360 behind you as well too, okay? But it's very rare. I don't use both of those things on my flash that often. Or if you want to reduce specularity, that's another time when you would use both of them on your flash. But it's not often that I use it in my work, right? Any other questions? Okay, cool.
One photo you had the tree, you were lighting up the tree lamp. You had two backlights in that pointing. One was pointing at the trunk of the tree, then one pointing at the couple, and then you had the camera left light.
Okay, so I don't know where my remote went, but anyway, the photo he's talking about was with the tree. You're asking about the light positioning there? Okay, so yeah, we had a light behind the tree, and that lit up the tree so we can see all of the leaves, the individual leaves, okay? The second light was behind the couple, pointing at the couple to backlight them and give us that separation between them and the tree. The third light was a mag box that was off to the right side of the frame that was allowing light on our subjects' faces. Because remember, for that image, this is for them, and I'll get back to it in a second here.
Backlights weren't
This image, right?
Yeah.
No. So these backlights are not gel because we want them to turn blue, right? And when I'm working in like this CTO, I call it a CTO environment, but like dusk when it's kind of blue outside, blue hour, we tend to not gel our backlights because I want them to turn blue. It gives it kind of like an ethereal, moonlit type of look, and that's what I'm going for in this instance. Now you might decide to do it to gel it however you want to, right? It might be your style of work, whatever it may be, but the way that we use it is we don't put gels on those backlights and we allow that light to turn blue.
You want the sky to turn blue, so you turn your
Exactly. So yeah, it turns the sky blue. It also turns anything that light is hitting blue. But remember, anything that the gelled light is hitting, which is the white light in this instance, is going to overpower that colored light. Okay. I'll get there eventually. There we go.
that one. So were you pointing the light to the wall?
Yeah, there's a light directly behind them pointing directly toward the wall, okay? And
How did you get it to the, I mean, it looks like there's different,
So-
it doesn't look like that.
yeah, because the light in the room was already that color, right? So we're adding that same color to our flash, and it's actually just creating a look in the room like there's ambient light in there, if that makes sense, right?
So if
You
there
can't
was a
see...
hot- if there was a hot spot or something, it's behind them.
Exactly. Yep, correct. There's another light behind them right here on his head. You guys can see that as well too? Yeah, there's another light right there. If I remember correctly, it was an ice light with an orange gel on it, and that's how we were able to edge light it, because we ran out of flashes for this image. We had like 3 of them in this photo, right?
There's 3, so one is behind.
Yeah, behind them, and or 2, sorry, in this room.
One
Yeah,
behind, one over you.
Yep.
And the ice just a little bit.
exactly. Yeah.
2 questions.
Yeah.
The last scene that you did in that one shot where you backlit the guests and you silhouetted the couple.
Yeah.
What was the direction of your magenta?
So the magenta gel, I didn't want to see the flare, right? So I put it in the audience right here, down low and pointed up high. So it was like right here, pointed upward toward the ceiling, you know, and it spreads out, so we're able to get that light on them, you know. And again, this is an instance. The magenta gel's one light, yeah, and then that's the sphere because you want it to spread out throughout the room, right? You know, I think in this instance we used a sphere and a grid on it, and the reason for that is because when I first was shooting it, we were getting magenta on them, right? It was like lighting them up as well. So I think we added the grid here to push that light forward in this instance as well too.
And the other one is in the Italian Museum. That's gorgeous.
The-
And I know the Italian Museum.
Oh yeah. So that's in the beginning. This one.
Yeah. So you had a light. You had a light coming down through that.
The spotlight up above, yeah.
Okay. And what was the ambient light? And you put a light where underneath, shooting up.
Shooting upward toward them, yeah. So it's actually on a table underneath here. So it's on the table, on a stand, aiming toward the roof, or toward the ceiling, yeah. Because we aimed it.
Both gel magenta.
No, just this light was gel magenta. This one had no gel on it at all. Because we're trying to get as much power as we could. It was on full power, shooting downward in order to light up the entire scene. So if you look at her pose, right, typically, you know, we have to give people a reason to turn their heads up. So I had to keep having her move her hands around in order to make something that looked kind of natural. And then we turned her head up to the sky, and then it allowed us to get good light on her face. You can see there's still shadows in her eyes, right? And if we were able to get a light over here, I would have lit her from the side, but we had nowhere to stand to do that. So we ended up using opposed to kind of get her face lit, if that made sense.
Yeah, and just out of curiosity, what was the ambient light like here?
It was actually pretty dark. It was kind of like this, but darker. Same kind of color scheme. Yeah, we killed. Yeah, we killed all the ambient. You could see the light that's in here is all magenta, right? It's coming from that bottom light underneath, which is spreading all around the bottom of the room because it was a multi-level room. Thank you. Any other questions? Guys, how do we get it up high? So if you see these stairs, they go up into a room, and then this is just the floor up there. It's a floor with a panel in it and about 2 feet of 2 feet of thickness. So we put the flash on the floor up there. My biggest worry in this image was that the flash upstairs wouldn't go off, like the radio wouldn't go through the ceiling, but it did every other time, and we got it to work. Yeah. No grid, because if you look here, you see there's like 2 feet right here, right? It kind of acts like a large grid in its own because it's focusing the light downward, not allowing it to spread out from the source. It was big. No, it had a softbox on it because the skylight itself was about 2 to 3 feet wide, right? So if we were to just use a bare light, it's going to be a much harder light coming down from the top. Yeah, and you probably could have used a bare flash here, but I had the softbox, so we use it there. It was it's kind of like if you use a softbox through a scrim, kind of the same effect. Yeah.
How would you what do you use to light outdoor in a session?
The question was, how do we use a light outdoors during a reception?
Outdoors.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I get asked that all the time. It depends on what your intent is, right? Do you want the light focused directly on your subjects? Do you have what do they call those, the string lights above, right, that you really want to show off? Do you not want attention throughout the room? In that instance, I would use a gridded flash to get directly on my subjects, depending if I had an assistant who can make sure they're continuously pointing those lights at the subjects. Because once they move 2 feet while they're dancing, now they're not in the light pattern anymore, which is why I don't often use grids during receptions. But in that instance, I would, right? Oftentimes, I'll use just a bare flash. I won't have any modifier on it. But more often than not, if I want that light to spread out around a room or if I want to show the outdoors, then that's what the Sphere is for. It's a really good tool. And then you can use this on camera to fill the shadows in front of your subject. So oftentimes, if you are using any sort of reception lighting, right? People are dancing, they're moving their hands, you'll get shadows on the face. So it's often that we'll actually use on-camera flash, and we'll put this tool on, or even one of these on camera and point it directly at our subjects. Very low power to fill in those shadows that are created by the off-camera flash. Any other questions about this stuff, guys? The question was, do I gel the reception lighting? And the answer to that is yes, most of the time. If I was working in here, I would use green gels, the fluorescent green gels on my lights to match the lighting that's already in the room, right? More often than not, you're working in a tungsten lit environment, you're gonna be putting CTO gels on your lights, full, or if you want orange in the background, half or quarter even, right? Which I tend to do more often these days. 5 years ago, it was always full CTO. Nowadays, I use a quarter or a half so I can keep some of the ambiance in the room. And I did that through my sales process, right? At some point, a client was like, hey, I remember we had this color lighting, right? We had amber lights in the background. They look white right here. So we adjusted that to make it look more representative of what it looked like on the actual day. Yeah.
I've seen, stuff, and I came late to this.
Okay.
Your sunset images that are just amazing. How do you get such good color tone on the skin? What do you do?
Yeah. So the question here was, during sunset, how do we get good color tone on our skins, right? And the way that we do that is, let me find a sunset image so I can show you here. Like an image like this, okay? We're not going to use standard ungelled flash on our subject right here, which is why, and I was telling them a little bit ago, which is why I love the MagBox, because now it allows you to gel the light at the source. Very small gel for a very large light source, which we didn't have that option to, it was a lot harder to do before, right? So what we do is we added a quarter CTO gel here to give that skin a little bit of warmth, which matches the background. Otherwise, what ends up happening, and it's very evident down here, when the light hits the floor, it starts to turn different colors. It turns white, and then you have the orange light from the sun coming in from behind as well too. And by the way, just so you guys know, there is another light behind them right here, right? What's up, Mario? Good to see you, man. There's another light behind them pointed directly at them, and I'll often do that at sunset because I'm going to shoot this at f8, f11, something like that, right? And that sun, as bright as it is, oftentimes isn't enough to give us that glow around our subject, so we'll put a full CTL flash directly behind them and backlight them like this, get that light underneath their chin to give them that separation. And that's up to you guys if you want to do it or not. It's just something I feel makes the image look a little bit better. Yeah. Any other questions, guys? All right, hey, thank you guys all for coming. I highly appreciate you being here. I'll be here to answer questions if you guys have any.